I was banging on the door of my grandfather's Colorado mansion, my hands turning blue, snow piling on my shoulders, while my stepsisters Brittany and Taylor laughed through the frosted glass. "It's just a joke," they shouted as the blizzard intensified. 4 hours later, I woke up in the ICU with severe hypothermia and pneumonia. I almost died. I didn't say a word about what they did. Yesterday, they showed up at the reading of our grandfather's will, designer purses in hand, smiling until they realized he'd left his entire $76 million fortune to me. And nothing to them. The look on their faces was worth every second I spent, fighting for my life in that hospital. You know those movies where the evil stepsisters get their comeuppance in the end? I always thought that was just Hollywood fantasy. Turns out sometimes karma actually does deliver, with interest. Updated. Holy crap, I didn't expect this to blow up overnight. Thanks for all the support and awards, guys. Several people asked if my stepsisters tried to challenge the will. They absolutely did, and that's a whole other story I'll share in the comments later. Have any of you ever experienced family betrayal that came back to bite them? To understand how I ended up nearly freezing to death on my own doorstep, you need to know about my family. My mom died when I was 7. Dad remarried 2 years later, to Catherine, mother of the twin terrors Brittany and Taylor. They were picture-perfect cheerleaders with matching BMWs in high school, while I was the quiet bookworm who preferred the library to pep rallies. When Dad died unexpectedly from a heart attack my sophomore year of college, Catherine showed her true colors faster than cheap hair dye and chlorine. The funeral wasn't even over before she was redecorating his office and throwing out his clothes. Meanwhile, I was barely functioning, trying to process losing my only remaining biological parent. Catherine had married for money, but Dad wasn't nearly as wealthy as she'd hoped. His business had struggled, and he'd been quietly borrowing from my grandfather, my mom's dad, to maintain the lifestyle Catherine expected. Grandpa Patrick, a self-made tech investor who lived in a sprawling mountain estate outside Denver, had always been kind to me, but kept his distance from Catherine and my stepsisters despite their desperate attempts to charm him. "It's ridiculous that old man lives alone in that huge house while we're cramped in this starter home," Catherine would complain, conveniently ignoring that our 5-bedroom suburban house wasn't exactly a shack. After Dad died, Catherine made it clear I was a financial burden. I worked 2 jobs while finishing my degree in social work, paying rent to stay in what had been my childhood bedroom. Meanwhile, Brittany and Taylor floated through life on credit cards and shopping sprees, dropping out of community college because education is like a scam for people who can't influence. They both had Instagram accounts with moderate followings, where they posed in clothes they couldn't afford and places they visited on Grandpa Patrick's reluctant dime. I never asked Grandpa for money, but we stayed close. I'd drive up to his mountain estate every other weekend to help with his medications, organize his books, or just listen to his stories about my mom. Those visits were my sanctuary away from Catherine's constant criticism and my stepsisters' juvenile pranks. "Ugh, why do you even bother with the old fossil?" Brittany asked once as I prepared to drive up during a light snowfall. "It's not like he's leaving you anything in his will." Taylor snickered, adding, "Yeah, we've been working on Catherine to take him on a cruise. Seniors love cruises. Maybe he'll fall overboard." They laughed like it was the most hilarious joke ever while I packed an extra sweater and some homemade soup for Grandpa, who'd mentioned feeling under the weather. Then came the blizzard that changed everything. It was late January, and Colorado was experiencing one of the worst blizzards in decades. The mountain highways were already closed, but I'd been staying at Grandpa's for a few days, helping him recover from a minor bout of flu. He'd insisted I head home before the storm worsened, practically pushing me out the door. "I've survived worse than this in my day," he said, tucking an extra $100 in my coat pocket despite my protests. The drive down the mountain was nerve-wracking, but I made it to our Denver suburb just as the storm intensified. Walking from my car to the house felt like pushing through a wall of ice needles. When I reached the front door, I found it locked. Strange, since Catherine's Tesla was in the driveway alongside Brittany and Taylor's matching Range Rovers. I rang the doorbell. Through the frosted glass panels, I could make out movement. "Hey, it's me! Can you open up? It's freezing out here," I called, fumbling for my house keys only to realize they weren't in my bag. Had I left them at Grandpa's? The door remained locked, but I heard giggling from inside. Then Taylor's voice. "Sorry, we can't hear you over the storm." More laughing. "This isn't funny, guys. It's like -10 out here." I tried the doorbell again, then banging. Through the glass, I could see Brittany and Taylor watching me, whispering to each other and smirking. Brittany's face appeared, closer to the glass. "Maybe you should go back to Grandpa's if you love him so much." "I can't. The mountain highways are closed now. Please, just open the door." The wind was cutting through my clothes like knives. "Consider this your eviction." "Notice!" Taylor called out, voice muffled by the glass and howling wind. Catherine's tired of you freeloading? Maybe spend the night considering your life choices? They walked away laughing, disappearing into the warmth of the house while I stood there in disbelief. Surely they wouldn't actually leave me out here. This had to be a prank. They'd let me in after a few minutes, right? Wrong. I banged on the door until my hands were numb, then tried the back door, the garage, even the basement window. All locked. My phone was at 2% battery, and the storm was interfering with reception. I managed one garbled call to 911 before my phone died completely. The last thing I remember was curling up on the semi-sheltered back porch, trying to stay awake as the cold seeped deeper into my bones. I kept thinking about how disappointed Dad would be to see what his stepdaughters had become. I woke up 3 days later in the ICU. A neighbor had found me unconscious and called an ambulance. Severe hypothermia, early-stage frostbite on my fingers and toes. Pneumonia was already setting into my lungs. The doctors told me I was lucky to be alive. Catherine and my stepsisters visited once for show, bringing a small cactus from the hospital gift shop. Such a shame you got caught in the storm, Catherine said loudly when a nurse was present. Then, voice lowered, I hope you didn't say anything unfortunate to the doctors about how you ended up outside. The message was clear. Deny what happened or face the consequences. When the doctors asked, I said I'd lost my key and everyone must have been asleep with the storm drowning out my knocking. I don't know why I protected them. Habit, I guess, or maybe just exhaustion at the thought of fighting another battle while I was still fighting to breathe without pain. What I didn't know was that my grandfather had been trying to reach me. When I didn't answer, he'd called our house. Taylor had answered, claiming I'd decided to stay with a friend instead of coming home. Concerned and not fully trusting my stepsister, Grandpa had called several of my friends. When none had seen me, he'd called the police. The officers who found my nearly frozen body had reported directly to him. My sweet, frail-looking grandfather, who I'd never seen even raise his voice, had gone ice-cold with fury. The day I was discharged from the hospital, a sleek black car was waiting outside. Grandpa's driver helped me in, handed me a sealed envelope, and drove me straight to the mountain estate. The envelope contained a key to my own suite in Grandpa's house, and a handwritten note. You're home now. The rest is being taken care of. I spent the next month recovering in luxury I'd never experienced, even during my visits. My own nurse, gourmet meals, a physical therapist for my damaged extremities. Grandpa visited my suite daily, often sitting silently beside me, his weathered hand resting protectively on mine. During one of these visits, he finally spoke about what happened. I've watched how they treat you for years, he said, his voice steady but his eyes reflecting a deep anger. I kept hoping Catherine would step up after your father died, that those girls would grow out of their cruelty. I was wrong to wait. I started to make excuses for them, a habit developed over years of peacekeeping, but Grandpa stopped me. No more, he said firmly. What they did wasn't a prank or a joke. It was attempted murder. The words hung heavy between us. I had nearly died, and we both knew it wasn't an accident. I've made some changes, he continued. My lawyer will explain. Everything when the time comes. For now, focus on healing. You're safe here. I didn't know then what he meant, but I would soon find out. Updated. Wow, thank you for all the kind words. I'm honestly speechless at the outpouring of support. Some asked about the medical bills. Thankfully, Grandpa covered everything. Others wondered if Brittany and Taylor faced legal consequences, not criminal ones, but as you'll see in the next part, justice comes in many forms. Have you ever witnessed someone's life completely fall apart because of their own terrible actions? 2 months after the blizzard incident, as my grandpa's staff discreetly called it, I was almost fully recovered. The frostbite had left some sensitivity issues in 2 fingers and a toe, and cold weather would probably always trigger breathing difficulty. But I was alive and stronger than before. I'd been living at Grandpa's estate that entire time, finishing my degree remotely and helping him organize his extensive library. Catherine had called exactly once, leaving a voicemail dripping with fake concern that ended with pointed questions about when you'll be returning to reality and if you've discussed financial arrangements with Patrick. I never called back. Then, on a crisp spring morning, Grandpa Patrick didn't come down for breakfast. His nurse found him peacefully passed in his sleep at 87 years old. The grief hit me like a physical blow. He'd been my last real family, my protector, my link to my mother. The funeral was small but dignified. Catherine arrived wearing designer black with Brittany and Taylor in tow, all 3 performing exaggerated grief for the small crowd of Patrick's business associates and friends. I sat quietly in the front row, genuinely mourning, while they worked the room like it was a networking event. Such a tragedy, Catherine kept saying, her hand on her heart. We were so close. I was like the daughter he never had. Brittany sidled up to me after the service, her voice syrupy. "So sorry for our loss," she emphasized. "I guess you'll be moving back home now?" I just looked at her until she grew uncomfortable and walked away. There was nothing left to say. The real drama came 3 days later at the reading of the will. We gathered in Grandpa's wood-paneled study, me, Catherine, Brittany, Taylor, and several of Grandpa's business partners. Mr. Hoffman, Grandpa's attorney for over 40 years, adjusted his glasses and began reading. "I, Patrick James Sullivan, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament." The legal jargon continued for a while, with small bequests to loyal staff members and charitable donations. Catherine was practically vibrating with anticipation, while Brittany and Taylor kept exchanging excited glances and scrolling through luxury real estate listings on their phones. Then Mr. Hoffman cleared his throat and read, "To my step-granddaughters, Brittany and Taylor Morris, who have shown me the true nature of their character, I leave the following. A life lesson on the consequences of cruelty. You receive nothing from my estate." The room went silent. Brittany's mouth actually fell open, while Taylor's face flushed deep red. "To Catherine Morris, who failed in her duty to protect all children under her care, I leave nothing but the knowledge that her true motives were transparent to me from the beginning." Catherine made a strangled sound of protest. Mr. Hoffman continued, "Unfazed. And to my beloved granddaughter, the only child of my daughter Sarah, who has shown kindness, resilience, and integrity in the face of unconscionable treatment, I leave the entirety of my remaining estate, including but not limited to my primary residence and all properties, my full investment portfolio currently valued at approximately $76 million, my controlling interest in Sullivan Technologies, and all personal possessions." The silence shattered as Catherine leapt to her feet. "This is outrageous! She manipulated him! We'll contest this!" Mr. Hoffman calmly removed his glasses. I should note that Mr. Sullivan anticipated such a reaction. "If you'll direct your attention to the screen." He pressed a button, and Grandpa's face appeared on the large TV mounted on the wall. It was a video recording dated just 2 weeks before his death. "If you're watching this," recorded Grandpa began, "then Catherine is likely threatening legal action." His eyes, still sharp despite his age, seemed to stare directly at my stepmother. "Let me be perfectly clear. I am of completely sound mind. My decision to disinherit Catherine, Brittany, and Taylor is based on years of observed behavior, culminating in an incident this past January that nearly resulted in my granddaughter's death." He described in detail what had happened during the blizzard, revealing that he had hired a private investigator who had obtained text messages between Brittany and Taylor, joking about leaving me outside. "Their actions were not a prank, but a deliberate attempt to cause serious harm," he stated. "Had my granddaughter died that night, I would have pursued criminal charges." The recording continued, with Grandpa systematically dismantling any potential legal challenge. He'd clearly prepared meticulously with his lawyers. The video ended with him looking directly into the camera. "Catherine, Brittany, Taylor, you have shown me who you truly are. I believe in consequences. These are yours." The screen went black. Brittany was the first to crack, bursting into noisy tears. "This isn't fair. We were just joking around." Taylor turned on me, eyes blazing. "You planned this. You turned him against us." I said nothing, just watched as their world collapsed around them. Mr. Hoffman handed me a private letter from Grandpa and discreetly guided me out through a side door as Catherine began threatening every legal action she could think of. In the hallway, now officially my hallway, Mr. Hoffman patted my shoulder. "Don't worry about their threats. Your grandfather made this airtight, and between us, he took a certain satisfaction in knowing how this would play out." That night, alone in what was now my estate, I opened Grandpa's letter. His familiar handwriting filled several pages, detailing how he'd watched my stepfamily's treatment of me deteriorate over the years, how he'd initially held back out of respect for my father's memory, and how the blizzard incident had been the final straw. "I considered many forms of justice," he wrote, "but ultimately decided that witnessing the consequences of their actions would be punishment enough. They valued my money above all else, so removing that prospect seems fitting. The fortune is yours to use as you see fit, though I've included some suggestions I think your mother would have approved of." The last paragraph read, "Remember, true wealth isn't measured in dollars but in how we treat others. You've always been rich in the ways that matter. I'm proud of the woman you've become, despite everything, or perhaps because of it." I folded the letter, tears streaming down my face. Outside my window, spring flowers were beginning to bloom across the grounds. Just like me. The first 6 months as a multimillionaire were disorienting. I had staff asking me for directions, investment bankers seeking decisions, and Catherine's lawyers sending threatening letters that Grandpa's legal team swatted away like annoying flies. By the end of the first year, I'd found my footing. Catherine contested the will, of course. The case never made it past the preliminary hearing. The judge took one look at the evidence, including the text between my stepsisters joking about how long I might last outside before turning into a popsicle, and dismissed their claim. They never even apologized. Not once. I completed my social work degree and, with the guidance of Grandpa's advisors, established the Sullivan Foundation for trauma recovery. The east wing of the estate was converted into a residential program for young women recovering from family trauma. I hired the best therapists, life coaches, and educational consultants, creating the support system I'd once desperately needed. Catherine and my stepsisters faded from my life like bad dreams. I heard through mutual acquaintances that they'd had to downsize dramatically, selling their luxury cars and designer clothes to maintain their mortgage payments. Brittany's Instagram following plummeted when she could no longer post from exotic locations. Taylor's engagement to a banking heir mysteriously ended once her financial prospects changed. Then, 18 months after Grandpa's death, they showed up at my gate. Security called to alert me. 3 women requesting entry. They claimed to be family. I was in the middle of a session with our newest resident, a 17-year-old whose story echoed mine in too many ways. Tell them I'm unavailable, I replied automatically. But that evening, as I walked the grounds with my rescue dog Max, another soul who'd been abandoned in the cold, something shifted in me. Not forgiveness, exactly, but curiosity. What could they possibly want after all this time? I told security to let them in if they returned. 3 days later, they did. They looked different. Cheaper clothes, less makeup, Catherine's roots showing gray. They sat stiffly in what had been Grandpa's study, now my office, eyeing the changes I'd made to the decor. We've had some financial setbacks, Catherine began, abandoning any pretense of small talk. The market's been volatile and investments haven't performed as expected. Translation: we're broke. That sounds challenging, I replied neutrally. We thought, being family, you might consider helping us get back on our feet, she continued. Just a small loan to tide us over. I looked at Brittany and Taylor, silently following their mother's lead. What do you think would be fair? I asked. Taylor perked up, sensing an opening. Well, if we'd each gotten even a small percentage of the inheritance, we'd have about $5 million each. So maybe start there? The audacity was almost impressive. I picked up a folder from my desk and handed it to Catherine. I had my team prepare this when security told me you were coming. Inside was a detailed proposal. The Sullivan Foundation was expanding its housekeeping and groundskeeping staff. 3 positions were available, starting at $80 per hour with potential for advancement. The package included mandatory weekly therapy sessions and a zero-tolerance policy for bullying or harassment. You're offering us maid jobs? Brittany's voice climbed an octave. I'm offering you employment with fair wages and benefits, which is more than you offered me that night in the blizzard. I kept my voice calm, professional. The positions include housing in the staff quarters if needed. Catherine slammed the folder shut. This is insulting, after everything we've been through. Everything you've been through. For the first time, I let my voice sharpen. I nearly died on our doorstep while your daughters laughed and took videos. Videos they deleted when they realized there might be legal consequences. I stood up, signaling the end of our meeting. The offer stands for 1 week. After that, the positions will be filled. If you're not interested, I understand. But this is the only financial assistance I'm prepared to provide. They left in a huff of indignation and slammed car doors. I didn't expect to see them again. 3 days later, Taylor called. Just her, not Catherine or Brittany. Was that offer serious? She asked, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. Yes, I said. All of it, including the therapy requirement. A long pause. I don't have anywhere else to go. Brittany's crashing with friends, but they've asked her to leave by the end of the month. Mom's boyfriend kicked her out when he realized she wasn't getting any of Grandpa's money. I closed my eyes, thinking of my father, who would have wanted me to help despite everything. The job starts Monday. Be at the service entrance at 8 a.m. 2 months later, Taylor and Brittany both work here. They're not great at housekeeping, but they're learning. The therapy seems to be making some difference, particularly for Taylor, who recently apologized for the blizzard incident. Awkwardly, but sincerely. Brittany still keeps her distance, and Catherine refused the offer entirely, last seen dating a potentially wealthy widower in Arizona. Sometimes I catch Taylor watching the young women in our program during group activities, a wistful expression on her face. Yesterday, she voluntarily joined an art therapy session during her break. When I walked by, she was helping a young resident mix paints, showing more patience than I thought she possessed. I don't know if people truly change. I don't know if I'll ever fully trust my stepsisters again. but watching them scrub the floors of the mansion they once expected to inherit has taught me something important about justice. Sometimes it's not about punishment, but about creating opportunities for someone to become better than they were. As for me, I sleep well in my grandfather's house, my house now, knowing that I honored his legacy in my own way. Not with vengeance, but with purpose. And on cold winter nights when the snow falls heavy outside my window, I feel his presence, keeping watch, making sure everyone under this roof stays warm and safe. Updated. Just wanted to say thank you to everyone who's followed this wild journey with me. I've read every comment and appreciate all your insights. Taylor has actually become assistant program coordinator now, while Brittany left after 6 months to start fresh elsewhere. Life takes unexpected turns, doesn't it? Have you ever had to decide between revenge and redemption when someone who hurt you needed your help?